And you are podcasting with Gary DeMar. Let's figure things out.
This is episode 59 of Bible Prophecy Under the Microscope, and I've titled this My Response to Amir Tsarfati's Response to Kirk Cameron's Response to Ted Cruz. Amir Tsarfati responded to a short video that Kirk Cameron created in response to Ted Cruz's comments about our nation's obligation to Israel in an interview Senator Cruz had with Tucker Carlson. And to say the least, it was contentious, and it's made its round all over the internet and on Facebook, and it's gotten tremendous viral distance, I should say. And that's okay. Let's get these discussions out in the open because there's a lot of misinformation surrounding Bible prophecy. And let me tell you, I should know. I've been in the thick of these controversies for decades. I used to debate dispensationalists. Many years ago, Thomas Ice, I debated him 9 times. Dave Hunt, I debated him. I've had Joel Rosenberg, I debated, and the list could go on. And I've done numerous radio interviews. I was on a California radio station a number of years ago where I was on for like 3 hours each night. People just barraged me with questions regarding Bible prophecy. I was on Hank Hanegraaff's show for like an hour and a half where he gave me a whole bunch of questions as well. So I'm pretty familiar with the territory. And of course, the debates have since dried up. And I don't know, maybe they think I'm a bad guy, or maybe I'm not a very good debater. I don't know. I rarely, if ever, get a call from anybody wanting me or asking me to debate somebody on the dispensational side of things. I'm not real sure that these debates really work that well and have any long-lasting appeal. But I have gotten information over the years that people said that they saw a debate I did. In fact, I did a debate, Ken Gentry and I did a debate for the John Ankerberg show a number of years ago when Greg Bonson was still alive, against Dave Hunt and Tommy Ice. This was in Dallas. Greg Bonson was supposed to be debating with Ken Gentry. Greg was ill at the time and asked me to fill in, and that debate was a complete disaster because John Ankerberg completely went off script. Even Dave Hunt, who was sitting next to me, I was sitting next to Dave Hunt. There was a little table in the middle. He even leaned over and said, "Hey, I've never seen John do something like this." And it's never shown. It has never been shown. We were in the heart of dispensational Mecca, if you will. Now, there may have been 500 people there, and really centered more on the whole theonomy debate than it did eschatology. But again, I have some experience in this area. But the eschatological views that Amir Tsarfati advocates have numerous interpretive problems that are widespread. And they're not much different from what I've experienced over the years, and I've commented. I don't know all of his works. I've ordered a bunch of his books and get a better picture of his views. But his response to Kirk's response gave me enough information that there really isn't anything new in what he has said, and I've heard it all before. But I want to be respectful and deal with this in a respectful way, and to lay out my views in relation to some of the things he said. I cannot and I will not cover all of this in this single episode. I'm hoping down the line that I'll maybe do a video on this and a direct response. I may do a couple of these Bible prophecy under the microscope and maybe run them during the week and not just on a Friday. We'll see what happens. So I've dealt with most of these arguments in my books, Last Days Madness, Wars and Rumors of Wars, my Gog and Magog book, Prophecy Wars, New Testament Eschatology with Frank Gummerlock, Identifying the Real Last Day Scoffers, The Rapture and the Fig Tree Generation, Left Behind, Separating Fact from Fiction, and 10 Popular Prophecy Myths Exposed and Answered. In addition, I've written a dozen of articles over the years, so my stuff is out there. And while I have not heard all of the arguments regarding eschatology on the dispensational side. I've heard most of them. And what I've seen with Amir Tsarfati isn't anything new. I've heard all of these before. I've written extensively on all of them. So Tsarfati has written numerous books himself. He has Israel and the Church, and an Israeli examines God's unfolding plans for his chosen peoples. To me, that is the key book that I will be dealing with in a future episode, because it's the key to this whole thing, which you won't find many dispensationalists dealing with. I'll see how well he does deal with it in that book. Another book he's got, Prophecy Essentials, Discovering Daniel, Exploring Ezekiel, The Last Hour, Revealing Revelation. And this one I thought was really interesting, the title, Jesus is Coming Any Day Now. And then the other one is, Has the Tribulation Begun? And there are probably others I don't have. And he's probably has numerous videos on this. He's a very articulate speaker. And so that's it. And I'm not trying to pick a fight. I'm just, responding to a response to a response. That's just the way it is. But when I saw Kirk's short video, I knew it would get him in trouble. If there's a third rail in eschatology, it's discussions about Israel. There are just some topics you do not discuss unless that discussion is down the line, just like dispensationalists argue the case. And that's just true. I mean, I've seen it everywhere. And if you take a position different from the traditional dispensational, I wouldn't even call it traditional, the popular dispensational view, you will be labeled an anti-Semite, which really doesn't fit the circumstance. You'll be labeled a anti-Jew, and that to me is troublesome and inaccurate. Because in doing all of this, I am not against the Jews at all in anything. I do not believe God has rejected the Jews, just like God hasn't rejected the Gentiles. But I'll get into more of that either in this episode or in the next episode. But here's what Senator Cruz stated in his interview with Tucker Carlson, which I mentioned was very contentious. And here's what he said. As a Christian growing up in Sunday school, I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And from my perspective, Senator Cruz said, I'd rather be on the blessing side of things. Well, I want to be on the blessing side of things as well. But Senator Cruz could not reference the verse where he said he was taught this in Sunday school. And I believe it's more of, you've heard it said that those who bless Israel will be blessed and those who curse Israel will be cursed. Now, I'm not out for cursing anyone, actually. And Kirk brought up this particular verse. He said, look, that's not what Genesis 12 verses 1 through 3 say. And so let me quote the Bible on this. Now, the Lord said to Abram, audience reference, go from your country. Whose country? Abram's. From your relatives, there you see your again, and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. So far, everything being said here is about Abram. Verse 2, and I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, speaking of Abram, and make your name great. And you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you, I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. And by the way, if you go to Genesis chapter 17, you'll see something similar. I will make my covenant between me and you, and I will multiply you exceedingly. Still talking here to Abram. And says, Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, as for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you will be the father of a multitude of nations. So there you have it. Kirk was absolutely right The word Israel is not found here. Now, look, I understand that to say that is to say, well, that doesn't mean that God wasn't going to deal with Israel. I'm not saying that at all. I just want to make sure we get what the text actually says. We can work out the implications of all of that as we go through the Bible. Now, you're talking about Genesis chapters 12 and 17. There's the whole rest of the Old Testament as well as the New Testament to extricate from these verses and many, many others what this covenant with Israel is all about. But in terms of Genesis 12 and 17, this is all about Abram, who later then becomes Abraham, because he is going to be a father of many nations. And what's often lost in translation is that God promised to make Abram, soon to be Abraham, the father of a multitude of nations. The end game here is the nations. The beginning of the game here is Israel. Someone is going to take this message to the nations. Israel was the chosen nation to bring God's word to the nations. There is no debate about this. The New Testament begins with the coming of Jesus to be a light for revelation for the nations and the glory of your people, Israel. It's not just for Israel. It's a light for revelation for the Gentiles. And early on in Jesus' ministry, we find out that Jesus tells his disciples in Matthew chapter 10, only go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. You will not finish going through the cities of Israel until the Son of Man comes. This is in verse 23 of Matthew chapter 10. And I expand on all that in some of my books. I'm not going to go into all of that, but it's obvious here that what is being described is Israel is God's chosen nation, giving a revelation to Israel. And the revelation to Israel, they were to be a faithful nation before God, and they were to take the message to the nations. In fact, if you go back and look in Deuteronomy, you will find that Israel was supposed to be an example for the nations. This is back in Deuteronomy. So that the nations, when looking at Israel, said, you must have a great God, because I've seen how God blesses you. And the reason that God blessed Israel was because they kept his commandments. They did what he said they should do. And then we find later on, of course, that Israel didn't follow through with all this. Now, this does not mean that God got rid of the promises regarding Israel, not at all. So, it does not mean that when the gospel went to the nations, Israel was excluded. The nations were grafted into the promises made to Israel. That is, believers outside of Israel, the so-called Gentiles, they were in fact grafted into an already existing Jewish church. To the Jew first is the biblical order. It's not Israel and then the church when Israel rejected Jesus as the Messiah, and later, after the rapture of the church, that God will deal with Israel again. That is not found in the Bible anywhere. And again, like I said, I've discussed this elsewhere, and I'll probably end up discussing it again when we get deeper into the weeds of this. So, Tsarfati said that Kirk butchered the Bible with some of his remarks. Well, on that particular case about what Genesis actually says, he didn't butcher it at all. He stated what it actually stated. Now, the debate comes on how that then manifests itself. And some of Tsarfati's later comments, and I won't get into all of them here, shows that he really is kind of scripture twisting. I don't want to come out and say it completely, but dispensationalism does in fact twist the scriptures and does not pay attention to its own claim about literal interpretation of the Bible. So instead of going through what Tsarfati said in a chronological way, I want to go to the end of his comments, and I'll in a future episodes, I'll deal with the middle part of all this. And here's what he said. So what I want to tell you, my dear brother, referring to Kirk Cameron, don't butcher the Bible and don't come up with this doctrine of demons of replacement theology as if the church replaced Israel. Kirk didn't say anything about replacement theology. And this idea that somehow the church replaces Israel is something that's concocted by the dispensationalists. And it's unfortunate that some people do, in fact, believe that the church replaced Israel. It's just something that the Bible does not even intimate at, and I'll get into the specifics of it. And he goes on to say, Tsarfati goes on to say, if God changed his mind about Israel, what can guarantee to you that he won't change his mind about you? Israel is actually the insurance policy for every Christian that God is faithful to his promises, and it's about his name. The Lord said to Jeremiah, only when the sun and the moon and the stars are no longer here, only then will Israel no longer be a nation before me. So long as we live in the world, he says, and as long as the sun is shining and the moon is there and the stars are there, Israel is there. And there's a lot to unpack here. And I'm not going to get to the sun and moon and stars thing here. I will get to that later. And this, in essence, he set a trap for himself in his interpretation of, let's say, Matthew chapter 24. And I'll get to that in another time. So hold on. This is not like, it'll be like a serial. I'm setting the stage for something that's going to come down the line. So the question is, did God fulfill his promises to Israel? I believe God completely fulfilled his promises to Israel. And I would say that what Tsarfati's view is, and I'll talk more about this later, that according to his view, God has postponed his promises made to Israel. And if God can postpone his promises made to Israel, then God can postpone God's promises to us. And I'll talk more about that. So, first, Kirk did not say anything about the church replacing Israel. And given what we will consider about God's promise to Israel, given Tsarfati's claims, I hope Israel is not the insurance policy for every Christian. That is, following his view, I hope it's not the insurance policy that he is counting on. When dispensationalists accuse someone of holding to replacement theology, it tells me that they do not have a handle on the New Testament's use of the Greek word ekklesia, which is unfortunately translated as church. And it's designed to poison the well. Oh, you believe in replacement theology. Oh, you believe the church replaced Israel. The church didn't replace Israel because the idea of the church is not equivalent to Israel. Israel is a nation. The ecclesia, improperly translated as church, is an assembly of believers made up of people from every nation. After this, John said, I looked and saw a multitude too large to count from every nation and tribe and people and tongue standing before the throne and before the Lamb. See, you can't say that about any nation. And so we've got Israel and we have all the other nations. Those are equivalent in terms of what nations are. You can't put the word church in there and make it parallel to some different body of believers in terms of how the word Israel is used and how the nations are used. Jews and Gentiles make up the ecclesia. John did not say, I looked and saw the church from every nation and tribe and people and tongue, as well as those from Israel standing before the throne and before the Lamb. No, these are people from all the different nations, from every tribe, every people, and every tongue. This is not a division here between Israel and the church. The ecclesia is not something new in the New Testament. Ecclesia was a common word in the Old Testament era and the New Testament, better translated as assembly or congregation. There's this idea that the church is something new in the New Testament is just made up out of whole cloth. And if you were to go into the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, you would find when the Hebrew word kahal is used, the Greek translation of that is ecclesia. And when you look at the Hebrew New Testament, every time you find the word ecclesia used, it's translated as kahal. The ecclesia is not new in the Old Testament, and it's not new in the New Testament. And so the better translation is assembly or congregation. And this is the way William Tyndale translated it in his translation. The Greek word ecclesia does not mean church, as dispensationalists define it. And it's a shame that this has become a standard in Bible translations. Let me give you a couple of examples from the New Testament. This is beyond Matthew chapter 16, where Jesus says, tell it to the ecclesia. Moses was in the assembly in the wilderness, or the congregation, the ecclesia in the wilderness, with the angel who spoke to him on Mount Sinai and with our fathers. And he received living words to pass on to us. That's Acts 7:38. So here he has Stephen going through Israel's history and uses the word ecclesia. And he describes the ecclesia that was in the wilderness, who spoke to him on Mount Sinai. And then you will find this in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 12, quoting Psalm 22:22. I will proclaim your name to my brothers. I will sing praises in the ecclesia, in the assembly. And what's interesting is that you will find that the King James version of the Bible translates ecclesia in Acts 7:38 and in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 12 as church. And so the Bible does not describe a distinction between Israel and the church. The only distinction is between believers and unbelievers, whether they are Jews or non-Jews. So stay tuned for the next episode, and I'm going to get deeper in to what Amir Tsarfati had to say in response to Kirk Cameron's response to Kirk's response to Ted Cruz on Tucker Carlson's show. That's a mouthful for a title, but that's what this is. See you next time.
Thanks for podcasting with Gary DeMar. Please subscribe and share this with anyone you think really needs to hear it.